Before we begin, I would just like to draw your attention to this incredible Christmas artwork of Luna in the thumbnail, illustrated by the amazing Aomori Art, hope I got that right, under the organisation ArtCircleR Studios. They really did a wonderful job and I am very happy with it. ArtCircleR as a whole are an independent group of artists specialising in the anime art style. They can do fan art, original characters, work for commercial and non-commercial use. They even do VTuber models if that's your type of thing. I've commissioned them a few times now and I have never been disappointed with the result. I definitely plan to ask for their help more in the future and would highly recommend them to you if you're looking for professional anime styled artwork. The description will include links to their Etsy, Fiverr, Twitter and website below. And once again, I really cannot thank them enough for their amazing work. What makes a good opening animation to a show can be very subjective. For some people that can simply mean anything that has a really catchy song or exciting animation. For me, an opening, otherwise known as an intro, is an introduction to the show you're about to watch. I'm sure I'm not the only one that likes to watch random openings on the internet and can be convinced to watch something just by the intro alone. They sort of act like mini advertisements. And the idea behind them is that they are what you see at the beginning of each episode, especially on TV where you can't skip it like you can with a streaming service or DVD. To me, openings serve two purposes: to tell you about the show you're about to watch and to get you excited for the show you're about to watch. It is easy to get carried away by an exciting song, but I always try and judge the visuals as well to see what they tell me about the story. One of my favourite types of openings is when they foreshadow things to come, something that works with the show to enhance your experience of it. It's always nice when there's a deeper meaning in there, so when you actually finish a show you can go back and be like, oh, so this was hinting at this the entire time. But the most important thing is that the opening complements the show that you're watching, and at the end of the day adds to your experience. So I thought it would be fun to rank all of Vanguard G's openings. Although this isn't an objective worst to best, a lot of people just care about a fun song and cool animation to get swept up in, which is perfectly fine. But I will always prefer something that makes me think rather than just having cool for the sake of cool. That's not to devalue anyone else's opinions, of course. Just saying that this will be based on my opinions and my reasoning. So if you disagree, that's completely fair. And just a little disclaimer, I am aware of the irony of this considering how much of a G fanatic I claim to be, but I haven't seen much of G Next or anything of GZ. I didn't like what it was doing back when I first watched it, so I stopped. And I will watch it eventually, it's just finding the time to do that. So for Next and GZ, I've tried to be fair and just focus on what the openings themselves have to offer. But if you feel like I missed some context that would have affected my placements otherwise, then that's perfectly fine. But anyway, let us begin with number 7. And well, saying all of that, we're starting off with the second opening of G Next. A lot of this opening is just, here's the cast, where it pretty much just shows you the characters that you're going to see in the show and doesn't really have any purpose aside from that. The first 20 seconds show Chrono, Shion and Tokuha turning into their units and flying off, which does serve as a fine enough transition into the title, but for the next 26 or so seconds it's just a slideshow of the different teams. To be fair, they are all presented differently. There is an obvious contrast between, let's say, Chrono's team and Shion's team, but they just kind of strike poses and there's not really a lot going on with them. And with the amount of time spent on it, it feels kinda pointless. It's neither exciting to watch or interesting to think about, and by the time it ends we're pretty much halfway into the opening. From what I can tell, the second half has two versions. The first version dedicates the entire section to Aichi, and the second version is what I consider the real opening. For the first version it's pretty much just Aichi doing Aichi stuff, until he sort of passes the torch on to Chrono at the end. I think this was done just for this section that he reappeared in, and Aichi is basically the protagonist of this franchise, so his reappearance does deserve this kind of fanfare, but it doesn't save the opening for me. And for the second version it's pretty much just people fighting. Sure, it looks exciting, but I don't really get anything out of that alone. Again, maybe this would work better if I actually knew the context behind these fights, but I think even if I did, this doesn't really do anything for me, it's just action because action. So the opening as a whole is sort of nothing to me. It's just a bunch of images without much meaning behind them, and then action without much meaning behind it. And number 6 is here for similar reasons. The opening for GZ. A large majority of what it does is just show off the characters and that's it. And especially since it's the last opening of the series, I was expecting a bit more. The title starts off with a montage of a bunch of clips from the show, which while it does look a bit fan-made, it does make it feel more like a finale, so that's fine. After that though, it's just Chrono running past a bunch of characters, with some characters getting a fancy image. Q4 get the spotlight for a bit, and Chrono and Aichi do this kind of high-five fist bump thing, which is kind of weird, but it is cool to see the two interacting like that, so I'll give them that. We then get a honestly kind of generic evil shot of the villains. It's kind of just saying, hey, these are the bad guys, I bet you couldn't tell that. The heroes unite against them, and Chrono does get a cool scene where he summons Chronojet, which is probably the highlight of the whole thing. But then it just reverts back to a really basic montage of the villains, followed immediately after by another one with the units. It is essentially just a bunch of fancy still images, and it doesn't tell you anything about the villains' personalities, who they are, what they do. It doesn't really have any substance to it, and considering how long is spent on it, it gets a bit repetitive. Again, especially for the last opening, it's just a bit disappointing. It doesn't feel very special. It's just a bit plain, generic by the numbers. But anyway, number 5 is the first opening for Next. I promise I don't have a big grudge against Next and GZ, their openings just happen to be lower down. Though I do like this one. In fact, this pretty much does what the second opening for Next was trying to do, but does it much better, which is ironic considering this came first. First of all, the introductions to the teams are a lot more expressive. It's not just frozen images of them. The camera actually goes through each member individually as they get to show off a bit of their personality, and then their team dynamic as a whole. It's much more interesting and enjoyable than what opening 2 does. It just has more life and meaning to it. We get a brief scene foreshadowing Cosmo's backstory before the opening goes into fight mode, and I don't mind this as much as it does show each character's key unit, and the whole point of this opening is setting up the tournament and the people participating in it. And to this extent, the opening finishes with each team walking into the arena. The opening has a theme and it goes for it. Number 4, the Gears Crisis opening. Considering there's only one opening for this season, it is a bit general in what it presents. You have to set up the entirety of the G-Quest without using any of the specific locations from the branches. I think it would have been nice to have some of the imagery changed depending on where Tri-Fi were at the time, but that's beyond the point. Overall though, I think it does a fine enough job of getting you excited for the season. The opening scene shows off Tri-Fi and their avatars. We transition to a map of the branches as they light up, showing that this arc is going to be a big adventure around all these different locations. We then get a scene of Chrono running down the stairs, which is a nice looking title sequence. We see Chrono Dragon next stage looking pretty cool, but it doesn't really mean anything besides that. Likewise, Shion and Tokuha get a scene looking out of a tower, and on its own it kind of just looks nice, but that's it. But then we get a small scene of Am and Best Girl, which establishes their presence throughout the arc, their position as idols, and the relationship they have with each other. Chrono finishes his staircase adventure and meets up with his team, and I'll be honest, I am kind of a sucker for any scene that involves these three. I just really like Tri-Free and the chemistry they have with each other. All three of them seemed a bit lost in thought before this moment, but when they meet up they're happy to see one another and Chrono gives them a confident smile. Chrono Jam makes an appearance as he does become prominent in this season, and then we get the fan service scene. The opening shows us that the original cast is back, and they will be significant throughout the G-Quest. I know that when this first came out, this was the type of thing that made people cry, or scream, or cheer immensely. I didn't do any of these things. I'm not really as attached to most of the old cast as a lot of people are, so for me it was more of an oh okay, but of course these characters are important to the franchise and the fans, so giving them a highlight like this is fine. We get quick shots of other characters, including one with Rive and Ibuki, hinting at their connection and the overall mystery surrounding them. Next is a scene where Tri-Free get to show off their brand new forms for their units, which when paired with the scene from earlier could be seen as a how we've grown kind of moment. Chrono prepares to slam down his card as Next Stage fires its cannons, and we get a quick glimpse of Ryuzu, signifying that he is the real target, the one we're aiming for throughout this arc. Ibuki gets to look cool for a bit, and Best Girl and Am show off their units, and then we get this scene. Tri-Free pick themselves off the ground as Rive hangs over them from the distance. And I remember how excited I was when I saw this for the first time. The mystery about Rive and Chrono's past hung over through the entire show, and this was telling us that we were getting closer. It pushed the plot back into the forefront of my mind, and I couldn't wait to see where it went. And to end off the opening, a group shot, because that's just kind of what you do. For number 3, Season 1 Opening 2. This one also sets up a tournament similar to what Next did. We start off with some stylish shots introducing Chrono, Shion and Tokuha individually. This transitions into all three of them standing together in front of the stadium, and then we get the title. The first half of this season is all about setting up Chrono, Shion and Tokuha as individuals, and then building their relationship, eventually becoming Tri-Free and being able to enter this tournament. So this beginning sequence serves as a nice we did it moment to reflect on how their relationship has developed so far. They had some difficulties, but they're together and they're here. The next sequence has a similar theme. Each of the members are seen in their own individual isolation before they all excitedly meet up with each other, and I like how it highlights their own methods of getting there as well. Chrono cycles, Shion is driven there, and Tokuhara runs. Just gives you a little bit of them as individuals. And again, I just love Tri-Free, so seeing them all enjoy each other's company like this just gets some points from me. But then we get a more serious tone, highlighting that Shion and Tokuhara will have their own rivals during this tournament. The bad guy team are briefly shown. Chrono chases after a card, which highlights some of the important people in his life and who will have an impact on him over this arc. Kansaki does the typical evil smirk thing, which cements him both as the main villain of this arc and a generic boring character, while Chrono prepares to confront him with a confident smile of his own. Chrono Jet soars through the sky and we get scenes of Tokuhara and Shion fighting their own battles. We get some foreshadowing of Chrono vs Ibuki, which has been built up throughout the first half of the season, and for the ending scene, Chrono throws Chrono Jet into the air, purely for the spectacle, and if he doesn't catch it, it's going to get damaged for sure, but it is what it is. Heading into top 2 now. Everything before now I would personally rate as okay to good, but these last two are great. So for number 2 we have the first opening of the series. Part of this may just be nostalgia, I fully admit that, but I do love this opening. Amazing song, great visuals, and a decent focus on introducing these new characters to us. Yes, the English dub overused Break It, but that's not the fault of this opening, and enjoying it on its own, it's really good. It starts in a black void as Chrono Jet Dragon descends. Similar to Aichi in his story, Chrono starts off alone. That is until he reaches out to Vanguard and it lights up his life. And that's pretty much his arc in a nutshell. A lonely boy is able to escape his personal darkness and expand his world thanks to this game. After this title we get a shot of soon-to-be Tri-Free. The white lines separate them and their sad expressions show that they each have their individual problems, but as they change to more determined expressions they will eventually grow together as a team. We also get some glimpses of their lives and personalities. Shion does his thing and Tokuhara does her thing. We then see Chrono thinking on a bridge, which he often does throughout the series. He had moments like this when Vanguard first changed his life and when he was reflecting on his fight with Ibuki. So whenever I see this scene it reminds me of how Chrono's journey started and what he needs to achieve. And this is fitting because he's thinking about Ibuki. There's a constant mystery surrounding Ibuki and his intentions, and of course he has a significant effect on Chrono throughout the series, so it's good that this opening always reminds us of that. He's always going to be in the back of Chrono's head driving his actions. We then get moments for the characters to use their key units. No real deep meaning, but considering this is our first introduction to these characters, this is fine. And there is a moment of Chrono fighting with Kamui, acknowledging the strong relationship those two develop. We also get to see a mysterious unit, which after seeing episode 3 hints at the greater plot going on and the mystery behind the Gear Chronicle clan. And to finish off, Chrono runs forward alone but is soon joined by Shion and Tokuhara. A nice moment to show that these three will eventually be united as a team, and it also serves as a contrast to the beginning, with Chrono starting the opening alone and ending it alongside his friends. And now my number 1 Vanguard G opening. I imagine this was somewhat predictable, but the Stride Gate opening is amazing! This has everything. An amazing song by Mamoru Miyano, meaningful visuals and exciting pace and tone throughout. Back when the show was first being released, this opening made me ecstatic to watch each and every episode. In fact, this may be my favourite Vanguard opening across the entire franchise, not just G. We start off immediately with a serious tone. A Depend card spins on screen as Chrono and Chrono Jet show their determined faces. We then see Ryuzu's plan, adopting a younger body and placing his hand around the planets of Earth and Cray. This immediately sets the groundwork for the opening and the season. We know what's at stake, we know how far Ryuzu is willing to go for his goal, and we know how important it is that Chrono and Chrono Jet stop him. We also get a really nice title sequence of Chrono Dran descending onto the planet, also showing the Zodiac timepiece in between the two planets. The tone then shifts from thrilling to somewhat sad. We see Chrono alone, darkened in his room. We zoom into his expression and I'll tell you, this scene stuck with me. Chrono has always been a rather hot-headed personality. Yes, he's always had an internal loneliness under that shell, but he does a lot of yelling and can really get into something when he sets his mind to it, and besides throughout the series we've seen him grow into a genuinely really happy person. So to see such a bright and passionate personality look like this affected me. I mean, look at the pain on his face, this boy is hurt. This scene tells you that things are getting real this season. Chrono is carrying some heavy emotional baggage, and facing Ryuzu is not going to be easy for him. I don't think any other opening highlights the character's raw emotion like this, and it was really powerful when I first saw it. And we see Shion and Tokuhara in similarly miserable states. Shion looks angry and Tokuhara is straight up in tears. Our heroes are at a really low point here. And to further add to the depressing tone, best girl dies! Okay, obviously we knew she wasn't going to die, but it foreshadows her involvement in Ryuzu's plan and how far she's going to go for her friend. And when she disappears with a crying smile on her face as Am reaches out to her, being unable to save her friend and screaming out in desperation and regret, this is some depressing imagery and really shows the seriousness and high stakes of this season. But then the song ramps up as Chrono summons Chronojet Dragon and the action begins. We've seen what's at stake and now is time to fight for it. We are shown glimpses of each fight to come with the heroes versus the villains. But the best fight is Chrono versus Ryuzu. The two collide and slowly turn to face each other as their faces switch between their own and the ones of their units. I know I said I don't like to give things a pass for being cool for the sake of being cool, but this imagery has a firm place lodged into my mind, and will most likely remain in my mind for as long as I live. It's just an amazing sequence. We get a brief scene of Rive and Ibuki as they are important to this whole conflict. Chrono and Chronojet reach out to Chronodran and combined into next stage. Chronodran disappears, but Chrono doesn't give up reaching out to him, and we end with this really nice group shot. The planets in the background and the cast in front. A good opening isn't essential to a good show. You can have a terrible opening but still a good show, or an amazing opening and a really bad show. However, Vanguard's Stridegate season, at least to me, is the peak of this franchise, and the opening only elevates the experience. It sets the tone perfectly and gets me so excited just to watch the show. I've always been into Vanguard and its stories to some extent, but with this era I was invested, and I don't think the feelings that this opening gave me is ever going to be replicated. Definitely deserves number 1. And if you disagree with me, that's okay, because these are just opinions at the end of the day. If you feel like letting me know your own rankings, please go ahead and do that, or if you disagree with my opinions, respectively, let me know why. Comments are appreciated because I value feedback and I just enjoy seeing what people think about what I make. Beyond the new year, New Year's resolutions and all that, I am hoping to make more frequent things, so if you feel like it, maybe stay around for a while. I might end up making something you like, or you can watch some of my older things in case they interest you. I am especially proud of my Chrono Part 1 and my Overdress Part 1 videos, but regardless of what you decide to do, thank you for being here. I was hoping to get this out for Christmas, hence the festive best girl thumbnail, but it didn't work out like that. That's fine. Who says we can't keep the Christmas happiness going a little bit longer? I hope you have a good rest of your December.